Should your podcast have inside jokes? Thank you for joining me for the Audacity 2 podcast. I'm Daniel J. Lewis. Inside jokes can offer fun potential for your podcast, but also have some potential costs. So here are some brief things for you to consider as you engage with your podcast audience, and keep those words in mind. Engage with your audience. In my signature fashion, when I started preparing this episode, I was making a whole list of pros and cons and some big thinking on inside jokes. But it's really not that complicated. An inside joke is some form of callback, a trope or a catchphrase or similar that only those in the know will get and enjoy. Because of this, inside jokes can be hilarious, but only for those who actually get the jokes. Inside jokes can be a sort of reward for your loyal audience, but can alienate your new audience. I've heard some people advise against inside jokes exactly because your new audience won't get them. But that seems overly focused on the new audience at the cost of engaging your existing audience and making them feel special. I think it really comes down to this simple guidance. Avoid inside jokes with your co-hosts and guests, because your audience won't get those, but embrace inside jokes with your audience. So where do inside jokes come from? First, some examples of inside jokes that I've heard from various podcasts. There's Lemons from That Story Show, or Hit in the Mouth from No Agenda, Katakai from Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, Super Easy, Barely an Inconvenience from Pitch Meeting. Now that's a series on YouTube. So it's not a podcast. I'm pausing for everyone to go, did he just say that? Yes, I did. I'll do a separate episode about that sometime later. There's also Mailchimp from Serial. If you've been a loyal follower of any of these shows, then you're probably familiar with and know exactly what these jokes are about. Or you can at least laugh at them every time you hear them. So where do these jokes come from? Well, when a joke really loves a joke. No. Some jokes will arise naturally as your audience essentially feeds the growth of those jokes. That's what I've seen from inside jokes from That Story Show, No Agenda, and Serial, where the audience really takes something and runs with it, and it becomes an inside joke because the audience made it an inside joke. While other things become inside jokes because of how often the host or multiple hosts of the show use those inside jokes, such as the examples from Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend and Pitch Meeting. It's the audience-fed jokes that I think you should work to embrace the most, because they will more deeply reward and engage your audience. That's not to say that inside jokes that you come up with within the podcast should be completely abandoned, but definitely focus on the ones that your audience is feeding. So what about the new listeners then? There are 3 approaches that I've seen and experienced with podcasts regarding inside jokes. Number 1, letting your podcast audience eventually catch on with your inside jokes, even if they might not even know their origins. Number 2, occasionally, not every time you use inside jokes, but occasionally explaining or pointing to the origins of those jokes. This gives you a great time to call back to previous episodes and link to those previous episodes in your notes for your current episode. Or you can point people to the name or number of those past episodes to look up. And number 3, making a glossary of inside jokes. This could even be a supporter exclusive or email opt-in incentive for your podcast. Your goal should be to both engage your existing audience and make them feel special, and to create an environment welcoming to your new audience. This comes from having a good balance so that your podcast is not overly filled with inside jokes, but it does mature with loyalty. As people stick around for the podcast, they start to appreciate it even more. Like a good marriage or a good friendship. Think of inside jokes just like extra seasonings for a meal. They can add something special and especially be appreciated by your insiders and celebrated when your new audience gets in on the inside jokes. And I think there is something special, like a sort of leveling up, when your audience becomes familiar with your tropes, catchphrases, and inside jokes. Then they'll feel like one of the cool kids when they can throw around the inside jokes too. And that's a precious moment for them to step up to that next level. Maybe you even celebrate it if you want to. And speaking of celebrating, you can even turn your inside jokes into swag, especially when your audience starts using your inside jokes too, or they are feeding those inside jokes with the content they give you. Like the lemons thing from that story show, I don't know if they really intended it to be that much of an inside joke, but then the audience started feeding into it, and it's a running joke now that comes up every now and then for that show. And the loyal audience knows what's going on. And what they did with that joke and several of their other inside jokes is exactly this. They turned those jokes, and you can do this too, turn those inside jokes that your audience loves. That's the big key there, that your audience loves. It might not even be the ones that you love. Turn those into swag that you can sell or give away. Like you could put them on t-shirts, posters, stickers, and more. And if you want to be really cutting edge about it, maybe you could even turn those inside jokes into NFTs, but don't go crazy there. But there is some potential. You could think about that, but just don't expect to get rich. Just expect to have a fun time with it. This was a very short episode, I know, because this is really a simple thing, and it does come down to this one simple concept. Avoid the inside jokes with your co-hosts and guests, because your audience wouldn't know those and might never know those. And they might just wonder, what are you laughing about? I don't get it. But embrace the inside jokes with your audience. The ones that, yes, they can laugh with you because they were there for it, or they can go back to be there for it because they can listen to those older episodes and appreciate them. Those are the good inside jokes. Embrace those. Push away the ones that do actually exclude your audience, no matter where they are in their listening history with your podcast. If you'd like to share this super brief episode and article, then go to the audacity2podcast.com/inside jokes. Let's also take a brief visit to the community corner. Thanks for the streaming Satoshis from Dwev, that's how I'm going to pronounce it until I'm told otherwise, Dave Jackson and Brian Insminger. And thanks for the 5-star review from John Moore on Podchaser. John said, I've listened to just about every episode of this show over the last year. Excellent content and advice. I particularly like his SEO episodes. And thank you very much for that kind review, John. And there will be more podcast SEO content in the future and some cool tools coming to Podgagement. And speaking of Podgagement, if you want more tools to help you engage your audience and grow your podcast, try Podgagement over at podgagement.com. You can track all your ratings and reviews. You can get a nice landing page to help you collect more ratings and reviews, collect feedback from your audience, even recorded voicemails from your audience, which can be all kinds of fun to use in your podcast. You can do more like discover networking opportunities for your podcast, collect ratings and reviews directly from your audience so that they don't have to sign up for an account anywhere. And there's so much more coming to Podgagement. So check it out over at podgagement.com. And now that I've given you some of the guts and taught you some of the tools, that's not a joke. That is my catchphrase. It's been that way since the very beginning. It is time for you to go start and grow your own podcast, passion and profit. I'm Daniel J. Lewis from the Audacity2podcast.com. Thanks for listening.